David and Goliath. Yay. Amazing story. We're going to look at that tonight. That's just to help get us ready for the story, right? Yes. We have a couple of birthdays in the house coming up this week. Did anyone have a birthday in April? Wow. Go April. Does anyone have a birthday coming up in May? I know of one. We have one soon this week. Her friends told me to come and say it. Yell out your friend. Whose? Is it today? Is it tomorrow? It's soon. Oh. Well, we have, someone said that Ella's birthday is coming up. Her friends, you want to give her a shout out? Yeah, they love you. They told me to tell you that. But I think we should sing for everyone's birthdays in April, May. Justin, Nathan, I'm sorry no one sang for you here. Anyone else's birthday in April and May? Let's do that. Every 2 months we're going to do this. Ready? Let's all get ready to zoom in on the story for 15 minutes, and then you're going to go home and fall asleep to the sound of storms. Very relaxing. Not scary, as we're about to see. We don't need to be scared. You don't have to be afraid. Awesome. A 1, a 2, a 3. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Just say the people you know. Happy birthday to y'all. Woo! All right, we've been in this series called Highs and Lows. I'm so excited. I got to tell you about this story. Got a little story for you. We looked at week 1. We're going to get to David and Goliath. Just hang on a minute. In week 1, we looked at Lamentations, and we learned 3 things. We learned that God loves you, He is with you, and He never changes. Hey, this thing called life, hey life, not the cereal, but actually living. Ways. Week 2, we look at Jesus walking on water in Matthew. You know the story. The big storm happened kind of like tonight, but in a valley and on the Sea of Galilee. And the storm was rising and it was churning, and the disciples were trying to get to the other side and they couldn't. And Jesus almost like walks past them in the storm. Jesus meets them in the storm. I'll say that again. Jesus enters into their storm with them. Hint, hint. The storm doesn't stop. Pain is real. But we have God with us. Praise God for that. We're not alone. Our circumstances may not change, but we have God with us, and He hasn't changed, and He loves us. What a thing to hold on to. How to trust in God in the midst of storms. That's what we looked at. We got to fix our eyes on Jesus. Oh, Peter was asked to, not that Peter, this Peter, Apostle Peter, not the Apostle Peter, the disciple Peter tried to jump out of the boat, and he actually walked on water. But then he began to sink because he took his eyes off of Jesus. He started to doubt. The waves in his life started to become bigger than Jesus, and he focused on them and not Jesus, and he started to sink. So we looked at that. Today, we're looking at David and Goliath because last week was highs and lows. We looked at when you're in a valley. Well, this week we're going to say, how do you get out of that valley to the mountaintop? Can you get out of the valley? Can you get to the mountaintop? How can you get from pain to praise? In huddle groups, some of you may have looked at this. Psalm 13, you looked at David's writing about he was in distress, and he called out to God in prayer. And he said, God, would you hear me? Tonight, we have an opportunity to hear a story that's so familiar to us. In 1 Samuel 17, you don't have to turn there or scroll there, text there. I don't even know how you do that, but you can do that. You can share it with someone else. But I will have the most important verses up here because it's a long story. A long story. If you've ever had someone teach through this, It's a big one. But I just want to highlight a few things because we've all heard the story. Even if you didn't grow up in church, the idea of David and Goliath is a very, very, very familiar term. It's almost like in the dictionary, this idea of, oh yeah, you can have a David versus Goliath. Your coach or coaches may have had it in a pump-up speech. Oh, come on, girls, we may be the Davids, but you need to go defeat the Goliath and volleyball over them. I don't know. Or maybe you feel like your team's always the David and you can't wait to be the Goliath. You're just wondering when that's going to happen. But this story, I want to show us the truth about what happened. And sometimes, at least this is what I was taught, my whole life, it was all about you powering up, you manning up, you womaning up, you becoming the David and taking your little sling there and throwing a stone at your giant in your life and tackling and killing it and saying, victory! I don't, of this sin in my life, of this trial in my life, of this temptation, it's over. But I want to show you maybe a different way to look into the story. And so I just ask you to look with new eyes with me on this because it's quite a story, and I'm going to have some just summary of there real quick. You can take a picture of the end if you want to get a picture. You'll be able to see it. But in verses 1 through 3, without a good story or without a setting, you don't get a proper story. If you went to see a new movie recently, which I won't talk about, they had to set up the scene a little bit in order for you to enjoy the whole movie. So in order for this to happen, you have to set the scene a little bit. And that's what happens with us. I have some maps on there in a minute you're going to see. I have some pictures. Enjoy. But our valley, thank you. Our valley today, we're going to see our story in, actually is a very important valley. It's called the valley. There's a place called the Shephelah, which is a series of valleys and foothills in Israel. And what this place does is it connects a region, a northern region of Jerusalem and Bethlehem to the coastal plain and the Mediterranean. It's like a pathway to get to the city of God, Jerusalem, and to Bethlehem. And so what happened was enemies would use this kind of access point to go through the valley, go up the mountains, and trying to invade, yes, invade God's land. Jerusalem, try and divide it. Say it ain't so. But they would do it. And the Philistines were God's huge enemy. Think of another movie where there's a big enemy that we all don't want around anymore. Well, the Philistines were this to Israel. The Philistines were this to Israel. And in this story, they pass through the valley, and they're going to go up and try to occupy Bethlehem, divide up Israel. But King Saul heard about it, and he says, no. I'm going to send my troops out to meet you, and we're going to stop you, Philistines. So the Israelites dig in on the northern ridge, the Philistines on the southern ridge, and the two armies are up. You can see the pictures if you want to scan through some of there are backaways. There's pictures of the map in the valley I was talking about. There you go. In the next valley, that's actually the valley of Elah. You could call it Elah or Ella. I've heard it pronounced by people there two ways, so who knows. But thing like you will in other sites, because it doesn't mean a lot to some people. But if you're on the right tour, you can park your car and literally walk in the desert in this valley, and you can go see around the area of where this battle might have happened. And you can go in the riverbed, and they allow you to choose a couple stones if you want. I choose one because, as we'll see, our person needed one. I didn't want to carry 5. And you can do that for yourself. And this is a very special place. And this is where our place is set tonight. Our story is at tonight. And these two armies are on these two ridges. And they're playing this big game of not it. Not it. Not it. Not it. Because either of them doesn't want to send their armies down into the valley. Tell me why. Why wouldn't they want to go first? yeah, yeah, you want the high ground because you're very vulnerable in the valley. They want the high ground. That's amen. I think it's Longley back there. And so they played this big game of not it until they have an idea. Single combat. Okay, to break it, the Philistines said, we'll send out your little carrier pigeon, little smoke signals, whatever you want to do. However they want to communicate, we have this champion. Why don't we send our champion, our biggest, kind of strongest soldier out, and Israel, God's people, they would mock them. Hey, how about you, God's people? Why don't you send out your biggest and best guy, the strongest, worthy opponent, your mightiest warrior, and why don't we just let them duel it out? Why all the war? Peace. Let's have peace. No more blood. Just one person's blood. How about that? I know that sounds gross, but it's in the Bible. It's a war. And they both agreed. And so, enter Goliath. Enter Philistines' champion. Let's talk a little bit about him. Enter and to defy God himself, to shame God, to make fun of him. Standing 9'6" by most accounts. I would encourage you to go read more about this. It's very fascinating. It's basically what we have here is it's a classic story of when you go fishing and you catch a fish, and the story grows a little bit. The fish grows because, Nathan, what's your first catch? A foot long. Well, tomorrow, what is it? A foot and a half. And then 3 weeks. Who knows? 8 feet. How did you take the picture? And so look, and by the time his grandkids come around, I mean, who knows how big this fish was? So some people are worried that the size of Goliath got out of hand. But I really do believe he was at least over 9 foot. He was a giant because giants walked around the earth. Yes, there were some giants that kind of formed in Genesis because the Nephilim came down and they knew the daughters of men and they made these kind of weird babies that grew up to be giants. But Goliath wasn't alone as a giant this time. I'm not going to get into how he was here now, but he had cousins, he had brothers, and they were all kind of weird. One of them had many, 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 many toes, right? This was a kind of this mutation of a weird mutation of a human. By all accounts, Goliath was also may have been just very intimidating and very kind of scary looking. He was not only over 9 feet, but maybe he had other things about him they didn't even want to write about. This guy was scary. Can we just say that? Helmet of bronze. He got his equipment from all around the world. The helmet of bronze, kind of stole that from the Assyrians. This coat of mail, Egyptians, kind of this metal, the metal kind of, what's it called? Rings on the metal kind of on him. I can't say it. Bronze greaves on his leg. On your head. Imagine putting a helmet on that weighed 30 pounds. That's sort of the equivalent of what he was wearing on his head. And then imagine putting a t-shirt on of 150 pounds. That's like strapping someone else to you and then trying to go have battle. Not to mention, his spear alone, they think, could have weighed up to more than 30 pounds. You maybe think, hey, I could lift 30 pounds. Yes, but a spear ain't supposed to weigh that. I mean, that's a heavy spear. Everything about Goliath was just huge. And he was very intimidating. This is who he was. This is the undefeated giant that the Philistines produced. And look at the reaction of God's people in verse 11. When Saul and Israel heard these words of the Philistine, because he was taunting God and saying, hey, who's going to fight me? They were dismayed and they were greatly afraid. Yeah, I could see that. I could see how they got there. I could honestly see that. Yeah, they weren't trusting in God. They were afraid of this giant in the valley. They were afraid of a giant in the valley. His voice, this one voice, paralyzed God's people for 40 days and 40 nights, as we read in the text in verse 16. That's what Goliath was doing day and night, just waiting. Who you got? I'm ready. Are you ready? I'm ready. Send your mightiest warrior. Let's get this over with. Enter David. Starting in verse 12, we read about him, and I'm going to fly here because a lot of the story is up and coming. You'll see. It's kind of like a fast forward button. David's brothers are out in battle. From Bethlehem named David was sent on a cheese and bread to his brothers, which is kind of funny. Way of these soldiers, no one wants to face him. No one. Yeah, he's pretty intimidating. Maybe there was a lot of this going around. All right, if Marvin doesn't get it tomorrow, I got that. Yeah, I'll get it. I'm going to give everyone else a chance to be the hero. Who knows? But they were all cowards, maybe. No one believed in God. No one wanted to take out this giant. No one thought that they could. No one was brave enough. No one was strong enough. And the first thing that David says, and I think it's amazing, in verse 26, he says, "For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defile the armies of the living God?" Who is he that should defile the armies of the living God? He says, what are y'all doing? Do you understand what he's doing? He's mocking the living God. Goliath is, he's like, wow, he really is tall. So he's taking the sling out, made of 2 leather straps. Don't think slingshot. Think actually like warrior. Like this is where the archers would be. They also had these, like slingers. So they'd have 2 big leather straps, and a stone would be placed in there, and they would just whip that around. And when they released it, it could be up to as fast as like a bullet at some point because of the trajectory and weight of the stone into someone's skin. Very deadly. And David was very experienced with this. So don't think underdog too much here. David was analyzing, okay, there's some open armor there. Maybe I could shoot there. A lot of experts think that David's plan was just to maybe stun him. Maybe this was David's plan, that maybe in his head, he was just to stun him and then to grab his staff and just go beat him to death. Who knows? It's not in the Bible. That's just their speculation. Who knows what was going through his head? But all he knew is he was walking out there knowing that God was going to have the victory. Because later in verse 45, that's what he says. He says, you come at me with sword and spear. And yeah, that's really cool, actually, that bronze. It's probably really heavy. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down, and I will cut off your head. Now that is a statement. David says this to the giant. He says, this is not my victory. This will not be. He didn't taunt Goliath with his skills. He knew that what he had was going to be devastating, not to the extent of which it will be, but he says, you know what? I could taunt you with my own skills, but this is God's battle. And you know the actual story, the battle. When the Philistine arose, he came and drew near David. David ran quickly towards him, the battle line. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into the forehead, and he fell forward on his face in the ground. Done. Finished. It says David was without sword. He ran up, he took Goliath's own sword, and cut off his head. Imagine the scene. Imagine both sides of the army. What's going on? We got Goliath down. Goliath is down. I report, Goliath down. Wait, what's he doing? The little boy, he's running towards Goliath, but the Goliath isn't moving. What's going on? He's taking out his sword. He cut off his head. He cut off his head. There's pandemonium. The Philistines are gone. The Philistines are gone. I mean, this is a bold move. What are you doing? That's crazy. Giant slayer. Gone. Goliath killed. And like I said, y'all, that's the story. And that's what we heard growing up. But you see how we have rewritten, or we have actually, inserted ourselves into the wrong part of the story? Don't you see how there's no way that we should try and strengthen ourselves up, do the best we can, just act a little better, and try and be David and take these giants out ourselves? Don't you see that that's impossible? Don't you see that David wasn't even David in the story, that he was relying completely on God? And I heard a pastor phrase it a certain way that's been stuck in my head right on around. His weapon it wasn't the slingshot. His weapon was worship. And that's been really kind of in my heart the last couple of months of, worship as a Christians, worship is our weapon. When we're in that valley, when we're in that pit like Joseph, when we're in that storm like the disciples at sea, when we're in a lopsided battle like David and Goliath, worship has to be our weapon. The armies of Israel, they were scared, and they looked up. They saw his shin guards, and they're like, whoa. They saw the breastplate, and they're like, that's really heavy. I can't pierce that. They saw the helmet. They're like, we can't fight through that. They saw all of his weapons, and they went up, and they stopped at 9.5 feet, and they said, we're done. 40 days, we're done. David went to the same valley. He didn't stop there. He looked up, and he worshiped. He said, God, you got this. How dare he defy you? He shamed your name. This is your land. This isn't going to happen. This ends today. Enough is enough. Let me take care of this. Amazing story of a little shepherd boy from Bethlehem who comes into a valley to take a giant out. Speed up to us. Another shepherd from Bethlehem was born and raised, died, rose again, Jesus. And as you, as a Christian, are walking this life and we're facing these highs and lows, when we're in that valley, when we're in that pit, when we're in that depression and that hard time, we have a giant slayer in our midst. That we're incapable of just thinking we can just man up, Hulk up on our own. I'll do better tomorrow. Me, my power, my strength. It's God. And the giants and valleys and pain can take us out, but you need to know they're not bigger than Jesus. And that Jesus defeated death. He defeated this on the cross. Cut off the head. It's gone. Death has no sting. It can't reign anymore. Jesus sits on the throne right now, currently, waiting the time to be full again, and he's going to come. That's our champion. That's Jesus. And a lot of you are actually experiencing real hurts, real pains, real low moments. That all does exist. That's a false gospel if someone says it's not. It's not all just good things all the time, not all just roses and butterflies all the time. No, the Christian life is going to be hard. People may actually hate you for your belief. You'll look kind of maybe dumb at times. But Keats didn't say that. Jesus kind of warned us. He said, it's going to cost something to follow me, person. But take heart. I'm Jesus. You, me, eternity. Let's go. If you're thirsty, drink of this living water, this free invitation, living water. We're invited today to do something powerful, to look higher than our giant in our life, whatever pain you're in, and to worship God in the valley. And that brings us to a place where we're actually just worshiping in this praise on a mountaintop. As we learn in the psalm, it's this running to God I found in my life. It's this running in pain, crying out, saying, ouch, yeah, this hurts. God, I need you with me right now. That takes me to a place where I can truly worship him in praise. My circumstance may not have changed. Even a physical pain may not have changed. But God is with me, he loves me, and he doesn't change. And Jesus is there. Whatever valley you're in, whatever giant you're facing, Jesus is there. Entering in, walking in, inviting himself in. He's defeated all of this on the cross. See your giant, but don't stop at 9 feet. You need to look up, and some of you need to wake up tonight. Let me pray for y'all, then we'll get you out of here just a few minutes over. God, thank you for this junior high. Thank you for letting them come out tonight. This is all meant to be, us all being here in this room. Every single one. You've planned that. I don't even know what that means. But there's a reason why we're all supposed to be here. And we thank you for bringing us here and letting us get to kind of huddle around your word and to learn something maybe new and to be encouraged in other areas. God, you're our shepherd, and we pray that we trust in you, and we trust in Jesus. And that, just like David from Bethlehem, God, that he can take down these giants in our life, God, that he's bigger than all of them. There's nothing too great for our God. There's nothing too wonderful for you, Father. I pray that we would, in our pain, in our worry, in our doubt, sometimes in our anxiety, in our fear, when relationships kind of fall apart, when we're having these difficulties with our family, our friends, I pray that we would be able to run to you and look to you in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the valley. God, that we could cry out in pain. And we know that, God, just like Lamentations Almost a month ago, we preached this. God, you are the same every day. You have new mercies for us every day. You love us, you are with us, and you never change. You love us, you're with us, and you never change. I hope that can mean something to a middle schooler right now, and I know it's going to mean something to them in 10 years. They just need to remember that truth about you. And so we want to pray this in your son's name, Jesus. And all God's people said, amen.